fear-based, designed to control young people's sexual behavior by instilling fear, shame, and guilt. We made a big stink, and Egypt played a huge role in getting them to recall that, but they replaced it with something very similar. This manual, the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, again, just a glimpse. It says abortion, taught about abortion and sexual diversity, saying they want more and better sexuality education around these topics. Talked about human rights related to sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, who wrote this manual? Interesting enough, Nanette Ecker, who was the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, it's called CICUS, that pushes this across the U.S. And she had also worked for Planned Parenthood Federation of America in the United States, the largest member association. If you go to their website today, they've been writing the manuals throughout Africa. It says, CICUS, sex ed is a vehicle for social change. It's not about health. It's not about education. It is about social change. I want you to ask yourselves, what kind of social change? Also on their website, it says if you care about abortion, then you should care about sex education. If you care about LGBT rights, then you should care about sex education. We found this agenda to be so insidious all throughout Africa, harming the health and innocence of Africa's children, that we created a documentary. And this documentary can be found online, and it's The War on Children, the Comprehensive Sexuality Education Agenda. And we hope that you take the time. Some of you have received my card, and on the back of it is a Stop CSE website where you can send that link to your governments and watch a panoply of the whole agenda. Well, in 2018, the UN came out of the closet again with a radical agenda in this document, the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, which replaced the previous ones I showed you. But this time, it had the firepower of UNAIDS, UNFPA, UNICEF, the agency that is supposed to protect the world's children, UN Women, and even the World Health Organization, who is deep and steep in this agenda to sexualize children. It actually says in this manual that CSE promotes the right to choose to have sex. It's the right to choose. It's the rights-based approach to sex education. Now, as policymakers, I want you to pay attention to that term, rights-based approach, because when it's used in international fora, what they mean by that is the LGBT abortion, CSE, sexuality-based approach. And they believe that abstinence, they rewrote the definition for abstinence, saying abstinence means not just choosing not to have sex, but deciding when to start having sex and with whom. They have an obsessive focus on sexual pleasure and teaching that to children and confusing them with gender ideology, the difference between gender identity and sex. Teaching children to respect promiscuity, teaching them that the decision to be sexually active should be respected by their peers, and teaching adolescent girls about their right to abortion. What's even more insidious, if that's possible, is they teach children to question the cultural norms that we are here to protect today, and then to differentiate between the values that they hold and that their parents hold regarding sexuality, separating them from their parents' beliefs. So CICUS is writing a lot of these manuals at the United Nations, and I wish we had time to show you that Planned Parenthood, International Planned Parenthood Federation, is even more involved in writing these manuals. In fact, now they even have this out of school, because this out of school manual can get to the children where there is less witnesses and they can push their ideology. I strongly encourage you to audit all of your out of school programs, because this is where they're pushing the worst things. It says in cultures that stigmatize or condemn same-sex attractions, this realization often results in a mixture of confusion, shame, fear, self-stigma, and self-hatred. So they want to support people in identifying as such. Pansexual people are attracted to all gender identities, male, female, transgender. They are promoting sexual chaos, gender chaos. And this is funded with the support of Norway and other governments. And they actually refer children to International Planned Parenthood, to a trans men entity, the Global Network of Sex Work Projects, and so forth and so on. CSE in Africa specifically, those were the international models. This started in 2013 when in Cape Town, a number of ministers of education and health lauded and adopted this big ministerial commitment to comprehensive sexuality education. Do you think these ministers have any idea what was inside those manuals that they were championing without knowing it? This is the most deceptive and insidious assault. And all these countries, I tried to bold many of them that I know are here, committed to implement comprehensive sexuality education in at least 75% of your schools. You see, we had helped the UN diplomats, your experts, understand the nature of this insidious assault on children. And every time it's proposed now, it gets attacked. So they went around to your health ministers and your educational ministers who did not know yet what this really was. And this is what they always do. They have a bypass strategy. Once someone is in the know, they bypass it to get a policy. So then they came back 2 years ago to try to get your governments to submit to being part of it even more. And not 75%, but commit to getting comprehensive sexuality education to 95% of your children. And with their youth-friendly SRHR, yesterday we talked about the SRHR agenda. And here is the trick that they do often. They got all these governments to agree to continue, and thankfully Uganda stayed out, and a couple of your countries stayed out of this commitment because they had learned the harms of this. But then they defined some of the terms after your governments agreed to it. For example, they put in the appendix this definition for sexuality, and if it's comprehensive sexuality education, then you're going to get comprehensive education about gender identities, sexual orientation, eroticism, fantasies, desires. Who is behind this? Look at all these logos. I've just circled a few. But notice in the middle, it's International Planned Parenthood. And notice at the bottom, multiple European countries. They're the ones that are funding this through UN agencies to get to your children. Here is the manual they created for Eastern Southern Africa, and I circled the logo Advocates for Youth. Do you know who they are? They're really the ones that wrote this manual. They brag about it on their website. They are the youth arm of Planned Parenthood in the United States. They say they're separate, but they promote all things Planned Parenthood. And this is a diagram that we find in many of the manuals that started with Planned Parenthood, and it teaches children about sensuality, gender identity, sexual orientation, teaching children to identify themselves by sexual urges, sexual identity. Can you imagine a manual in Africa teaching teachers to teach children that gender identity means knowing whether one is male, female, neither, or somewhere in between, as if that were possible. These are not medically accurate. They're not scientifically accurate, although they claim to be so. This manual for Malawi was intended to be used with ages 10 to 24. Comprehensive, notice it's out of school sexuality education. Notice the logos again. Planned Parenthood's youth arm, Advocates for Youth, UNFPA, SIDA, the Swedish foreign aid entity, and many other logos. And again, this is protecting sexual and reproductive health. This is the sexual and reproductive health approach to sex education, which is the rights-based approach, which is the LGBT abortion, radical sexual pleasure approach to sex education, starting at age 10. And they want to get children desensitized to sexual things. This is a common activity we find in many manuals. List all the ways an individual can express sexual feelings alone or with a partner, including all the specific sexual behaviors that you've ever heard of. Imagine, try to make the longest list possible. And here is an idea of a sample of lists, and I don't even want to read some of the things in here about a mouth on different sexual parts of the body and different rubbing your breasts and different things to get sexual pleasure. This is what they're teaching all across Africa, even teaching children about sex toys and how to use them in the anus and to be careful with them. Now here's an ironic, internally inconsistent paragraph that says people cannot change their sexual orientation, but then they say sexuality is fluid. Which one is it? Some people may experiment with sexual orientation. This is in Ghana. Okay, know it, own it, live it. This is a Planned Parenthood book. UNFPA is partnering with them. And there are so many graphic pictures I cannot show you, but this is an example of how they're teaching young children with erect body parts. Here's South Sudan. You have the right to choose who to have sex with. Instead of telling children to delay until marriage and waiting until they have a spouse who they're faithful to, they say you choose whenever you want, it's up to you. And that the best way to prevent HIV when you're a child is not to avoid having sex, but just to avoid having unprotected sex. South Sudan, again, sexual health and sexual rights. That you have a right to negotiate sex. You have a right to say yes. This is Kenya. Allow learners to discuss some sexual behaviors, such as kissing, sexual intercourse, or oral sex. Again, trying to desensitize. This also is Kenya, and I apologize, this is by my own government who supported this, USAID. Again, these very graphic pictures. And Sierra Leone. Over the next 2 years, Melissa had sex with 4 other boys. She enjoyed sex. Why would a child need to learn that? A lot of inappropriate role plays and scenarios. Uganda. Decide what you want sexually and don't act confused about it. Just be clear about what you want. This is to children. Young people need to be comfortable talking about sexuality. These are the same tactics that pedophiles use to groom their victims. Eswatini. This is the DREAMS program from the United States. They can decide, this is children, if, when, and with whom, and under what circumstances to have sex. They can negotiate condom use, and they teach them how to negotiate having sex with condoms. Here you see that all these different manuals for the out-of-school programs in East and Southern Africa, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe. They teach children that outer course is an allowable sexual behavior. It's safe because you don't exchange body fluids, and that could include heavy petting and masturbating. But this is the worst of all the ones we've ever found, and this is Zimbabwe out-of-school program. Imagine the logo of the European Commission and multiple European countries and UNFPA, the donors Canada, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, United Kingdom, the European government, and Gavi. This is again about protecting sexual and reproductive health, starting at age 10. And they give children a list of about 20 sexual patterns, they call it. And they have to read through them all, understand them all: masturbation, sodomy, voyeurism, exhibitionism, and even pederasty, bestiality, necrophilia, sexual pleasure from corpses, sexual pleasure with feces or urine. This is unconscionable. This is child abuse sanctioned by all these governments and the United Nations entities that support them. And if you think fighting gender-based violence is a good thing, I agree with you. We are against violence. But again, they're using the gender-based violence movement. They're initiated the prevention of gender-based violence, and Greg will tell you more about that in the treaty, in order to push comprehensive sexuality education as the solution for prevention. This school-related gender-based violence actually says, to prevent violence and promote gender equality, you need what? comprehensive sexuality education, and that this will give the children the knowledge, skills, and values about relationships and gender and sexuality. The question is, whose values? This is happening all across Africa, and this is one of the major reasons we need a charter for Africa to protect against this insidious assault on the children. We hope that each of your parliaments will join in the goals of this event to support a protocol to protect the children, the future families of Africa. That's the only way you're going to be able to protect the family, which is the natural and fundamental unit of society. Thank you.